Welcome to a more just and merciful world. I'm Dr. Kathy Humphrey, president of Carlow University. On this podcast, we talk to leaders, teachers, artists, and scientists from around the globe to explore how to bring more justice and mercy in our own world. I am so privileged that today I am with Sister Sheila Carney, a sister of mercy, a beloved member of the Carlow community. Sister Sheila, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Humphrey.
We're going to start out today, Sister Sheila, learning a little bit more about the history of the Sisters of Mercy. Will you share that with us and tell us a little bit about the education and how the Sisters of Mercy have made a difference in this community?
I'd be glad to do that. It's a wonderful story. And it begins with a woman whose name was Catherine McAuley, born in Dublin, Ireland in 1789-90. We're not quite sure of the year. Into a family where her parents were very different. Her father was a very devout Catholic with a huge heart for persons living in poverty. Her mother, 30 years younger, was much more interested in the social life of Dublin. But if you put that together, what you have is a woman who is very much at ease in all levels of society. Mm-hmm. She accompanied her father in his work with people living in poverty. She accompanied her mother into the social scene in Dublin. So she was able to move easily back and forth between these two realms, which became important later on. Her father died when she was quite young. Her mother was not financially astute, so the family gradually really descended into poverty. And by the time she was 20, her mother had died, and her family had split up. Her siblings were living in one place, she was living in another. Eventually, she was invited by an elderly couple to come and live with them as a companion to the wife. And she lived with them for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And when they died, they left her everything. So she's about 43 years old now. For almost her entire life, she'd been dependent on other people to provide for her needs, no permanent abode. And now she has a Georgian mansion, a 22-acre estate, and by our reckoning, about $3 or $4 million.
Which is amazing.
Just
right?
Amazing, yeah. She had thought that she would receive a small inheritance, and her idea was that she was going to buy a house and take in women like herself. Mm-hmm. So women with no permanent home, women without marketable skills, women looking for work. We'd call it transitional housing. Mm-hmm. She would bring them in. She would train them to be domestic servants. That doesn't sound appealing to us, but in those days that was a good, stable job. Mm-hmm. And then send them out into the workforce. Well, the inheritance enabled her to expand that dream significantly. So she bought a big piece of property at the corner of Bagot Street and Herbert Streets in a very upscale neighborhood of Dublin. A very strategic decision, because her intention was that people with resources would every day be confronted by people with need. Mm-hmm. Because she brought them into that neighborhood every day. So we talk about her as a bridge builder, that she connected people with means to people with need.
Catherine McAuley, a bridge builder, mm-hmm. and a woman who moved from literally nothing, because really she's willing to be a good servant. Mm-hmm. And at some point, this is something, part of the story that I don't hear often about is this is a woman who was dedicated to serving others from the very beginning. And it was really her service, right, mm-hmm. that really put her in this position of wealth.
That's exactly right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so talk to us a little bit, why does a woman who has all this money make a decision that she's going to serve other people and put them in a very wealthy neighborhood mm-hmm. and draw poverty into that neighborhood?
Mm-hmm. Well, we trace that back to the influence of her father, which must have been really profound because she was 5 when he died. But the experience of being with him in his service to people living in poverty shaped her entire life.
Mm-hmm.
So even before she received the inheritance, she was already thinking about who she was going to help next, and it was those women who didn't have a future that she decided that she was going to align herself with.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so this woman, she makes a decision that she's going to use this wealth to help women who, in all intents and purposes, were like her.
Exactly.
And she could have done a lot of other things. Oftentimes we talk about walking into the chaos of others. We say that that's the ultimate meaning of mercy, that you are willing to walk into this chaos. Share a little bit about that and tie it really to Sister Catherine McAuley, how she embodied mercy and walking into that chaos.
Okay. Well, that's a phrase that comes from a book by a Jesuit father named James Keenan, which we read in a program here at Carlow. And in that book, he defines mercy as walking into the chaos of another person's life. So mercy for a lot of people is a squishy kind of virtue. It's like marshmallowy.
Mm-hmm.
And in reality, it's a very tough virtue.
Yeah.
It's challenging, it's demanding. It requires you to put yourself in proximity to people who are living in very difficult circumstances, to be with them and to learn about their lives, and to, even in cases where there's nothing you can do about the circumstances they're in, you can witness and you can accompany. And that's mercy. It's a response to the suffering of the people around you.
You know, recently I was in New York City, and I was at a coffee shop, and there was a homeless woman there, and she had all of her belongings, and I decided to sit near her, and because I was sitting near her, a woman couldn't pass easily through. And this woman said, would you mind moving, because I do not want her pillow to touch me. And I was very taken aback by the insensitivity, the rawness of the unwillingness of acknowledging this individual as a person. So when I hear your definition of the proximity, because oftentimes we are afraid of the proximity, right? And we don't mind throwing money at it, or we don't mind being near people who are helping with it. But the proximity that you're talking about is really what Catherine also embodied by dropping that house
where she did. Yeah. And you know, her belief about making a better world had to do with education. It had to do with giving the people the tools that education provides us with. So the first thing she did in that building was to start a school. And later, as this story goes on, she, through the advice of the local bishop, chose to form a religious community. And then that community began to spread around Ireland. Everywhere they went, the first thing was to start a school for children living in poverty. Because that was needed, regardless of what other needs existed, that was needed. So that's how the Sisters of Mercy became so associated with education.
Right.
And then when they came to the United States in 1843, the very next year, they founded a school in downtown Pittsburgh, which has been through a number of name changes, but is now the campus school of Carlow University. So our campus school is the first Mercy school in the United States.
I know, and most people don't know that.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you shared that. We literally have the first school in this country.
That's right.
By the Sisters of Mercy. So that's an exciting historical point. So thank you for bringing that into the to the conversation. But it also says something even greater, because one of the things you often say when you talk about that story is that these were 5 gutsy women to start a school in with nothing, and to be so committed to starting that school in a world where at that point, women really didn't have very much power in this country to think they were strong enough to start a school in the midst of it.
Yeah.
So once again, we're walking into the chaos.
Yeah, and you're talking now about the founding of the college. What started as a Mount Mercy College is now Carlow University. And it's a characteristic that we name about the Sisters of Mercy, that we're always looking for the next great need.
Yes.
Who's not being served? Where are the gaps? And what resources do we have to be able to step into that?
Absolutely. And that phrase, looking to meet the next great need, is actually a phrase that drew me and draws many into our community, because we are such a community that is vested in looking for how do we step into the chaos and how do we help people move out of the chaos. And so it's one of the things that I found exciting about the Sisters of Mercy. But how in the world did that become so ingrained into the Carlow culture?
Well, I think for many years there were a lot of sisters on this campus, and when that's kind of the predominant population, if I could say it that way, it creates a culture and it creates an environment, which fortunately has been strong enough that even though there aren't many sisters on campus now, that culture remains because they embedded it so deeply in the life of the university.
They really have. And it's pretty amazing that you hear it in the faculty. You even hear the students feeding it back to you in certain things that they say and how they treat one another, which I think is really exciting to see on a day-to-day basis, because it's so much a part of the culture. And when we talk with them about justice being a value here, how important it is, and it all began with the Sisters of Mercy really embedding that as a concern. We're able to say all things are not accepted here, right? And that is, I think, something so special that the Sisters of Mercy have really built into the DNA of Carlow. Let's move to how we've created different kinds of graduate. Oftentimes I hear people say, you can really tell the difference between a Carlow nurse. And actually, I was recently in the hospital with my sister, and I said to her, I think that's a Carlow nurse right there. And so I said to the nurse, I said, where'd you go to school? And she said, I graduated from Carlow. And so my sister said, how did you know? Sister Sheila, how do we know? What do we do? What's the magic sauce here?
Well, you could look at nursing as a technical profession. It is. It's about skills. It's about recognizing signs and responding with scientific interventions. But a real nurse is a compassionate presence in the life of someone who is ill, who is willing to take the time to listen, to help a person through their fears. We have begun the custom here of blessing the hands of graduating nurses. And that's such a significant sign, because their hands are the instruments of their technique, but their hearts are the instruments of healing that they bring into the lives of the people that they care for.
Absolutely. I know even at the candle lighting service that we do for the nurses, when they say these are the ones who are committed to holding the hand of those who are sick and dying. It's always so touching to me that our students leave with that message as they are graduating, that they are the hands that will touch the lives of other people. And I don't think it's just the nursing students. I think our students in general hear messages of that nature because of the culture that we build here every single day. So the creation of a more just and merciful world, where'd that come from? And how are we doing it?
Yeah. I'm not exactly sure where that phrase came from. It was at the time when we were revising the mission statement and the vision and the philosophy of the university. And that line ends every one of those statements. And I often say to people, it's not because we couldn't think of another thing to say. It's not redundancy, it's emphasis.
Right.
We want everywhere you read about Carlow to read that that's what our goal is.
Absolutely.
And when we talk about justice, we define it as giving a person what is their due or giving back to someone what belongs to them. So if you think about your story of the woman in the coffee shop, what's been taken away from that woman is her human dignity. And justice requires that we restore it to her.
Yes.
And I think you see that here on campus in the attention to students who are differently abled.
Yes.
Every effort made to help them to feel totally incorporated into the campus and with the same dignity and the same opportunity as everyone else. Those are all questions of justice.
Yeah. You know, Sister Sheila, we're in a time in our world where people are crying for justice. You know, we listened yesterday at University Hour about the simple need for water and how so many people in our country today do not have access. It's something that we just don't think about often, and oftentimes when we think about this notion of justice, we're thinking about the issues of racism and the issues that of anti-Semitic behaviors and all of those kinds of things. But we're not also thinking about the issue of poverty and the issue of not being able to have access to things that actually what you've said that you are due, like water. And in your mind, what has to happen in our world in order for us to restore justice? Or is this just a hope and a dream that will never be realized?
Well, I think it's overwhelming if you think of it on a worldwide scale. But justice is caring for one another. You know, if you care for another person, you want them to have the fullness of life that is due them. And you work towards that. That's what a love relationship is. So I don't try to think about how I'm going to create a just and merciful world globally. I think about how I'm going to do it with my staff. How am I going to do it with the community of sisters? How am I going to do it with my colleagues here at the university? That's manageable. I mean, I can, if you think about the water problem, it seems huge. I can turn off the water tap while I'm brushing my teeth. And the amount of water that saves is significant. And it's so simple. I think we're required to look at the issues in our world and find the solutions that are within our grasp.
And it's interesting. So, in essence, I hear you saying, we need to provide justice in the places where we stand, right? And hopefully that will move from that space to other spaces because of what we've given in that time, at that place, in that time. And is that the message that we need to share? It's not a problem that's so daunting that we can't solve. We need to start solving it one person, 1 minute at a time.
Yeah. You know, several places on campus we have peace poles. that are invitations to peace. And we had a sister in the community. She's with God now, but she's very tall and erect, and she declared herself a peace pole. There will be no violence, no verbal violence, no physical violence within a circumference of 10 feet around me. Imagine if we all did that.
Yeah,
and we
right?
just have all these intersecting circles of peace.
Right. Absolutely. And, to give voice to it.
Yeah.
To make a declaration. There will be no in my space.
Yeah.
And I think that's a declaration that many could make if they would make it. It makes me think about that Peter Niemöller poem where he says, in Germany, they first came for the Jews and I didn't speak up, and then it ends with many other pieces of places where they could have spoken up, but it ends with that phrase, but by that time, there was no one left to speak up. And I think the notion of speaking up is what you're saying, making a declaration that there will be peace in my space because I'm going to create it. So, Sister Sheila, another way that we talk often at Carlow about impacting the lives of our students is to really challenge them to become ethical leaders. Leaders who are not just committed to justice, but how they're going to do that justice. Talk to us a little bit about programs or services or ways in which we try to develop those ethical leaders.
Well, actually, that fits so nicely into the Mercy tradition of contemplation and action, which says that that we're in this cycle of doing something and then thinking about it and maybe gaining some wisdom from that reflection that leads us to that our next action is a little bit different, a little bit more focused. And if you think about something like Mercy Service Day, when students are going out into the community to serve, they're well prepared to do that. They learn about the agency they're going to. They learn about the societal problems they're going to address there. They go and they do the service, and then they come back, and there's a period of reflection on that then guides them as they go forward. So from my perspective, being an ethical leader is not acting spontaneously. It's developing a set of standards for yourself and always examining your actions in terms of those standards. And even if people just slowed down a little bit and gave themselves the time to do that as they're moving through their lives, I think we'd see significant changes.
Absolutely. In this world where we don't see a lot of ethical behavior, unfortunately, this generation has just been inundated with unethical behavior. How do we make sure that the balance is there? How do we take them to that next level to say what you were saying earlier, the establishment of what is right, and how do you help us get to what is right?
I think we show them what it looks like. By creating an institution that is ethical and that treats people ethically. It goes hand in hand with the notion of justice as giving people what is their right.
And I think the fact that we talk about it too, right? That there, I say that here. There are rights here and there are wrongs. Yes, there's plenty of gray, but there are some things that are simply right and good and just. And I think that every time you stand up and you talk with the community, we hear a little bit of that. And so I do agree that mirroring of that message on a routine basis every day helps us to move in that direction, and hopefully gives our community the internal capacity to do what's right. So, Sister Sheila, I'm really happy that you took the time this morning to share the Sister of Mercy's story, talk a little bit about our history and our culture, really, of why we are who we are. I think about my own family of origin and how that family of origin has a culture in itself, because we are devoted to doing the things that we believe were good for our family. And that devotion is what I think about every single day. But it's more important because I think people like you in our community showing that devotion to our students, to our staff, to our faculty, is really what makes us a special place. So thank you for all you do for Carlow.
Thank you, Dr. Humphrey.